Good morning, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order. The date is November 21st, 2019. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I would like to introduce the panel. My name is Brent McIntyre. I'll be the chair. To my left is Linda McFadgen, and to my far left is Lynn Nesbitt.
You mixed that up a little bit.
Did I?
That's okay.
Oh. You have to be patient. It's
Yeah.
only my second time. The assessor for today is Lindsay Wareham, and the secretary is Huda Aziz. We will be hearing applications for revision of assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. Statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. All information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record.
Would you like to affirm or swear in? Please state your full name.
Lindsay Wareham.
And you swear the evidence you represent is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you like to swear in or affirm?
Sorry.
Please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
And do you swear the evidence you represent is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
The first matter on the docket is 170 William Stevenson Way, and Ms. Wareham, you can proceed.
We're looking at 170 William Stevenson Way. The file number is 19-2671. The roll number is 12091920,500. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $6,376,000. This is a surface parking lot with 231 surface parking stalls. It's located off Wesley Street, east of Main, and off William Stevenson Way. It's along the south side of William Stevenson Way near the Ball Diamond and along the rail line. If you turn to page 2 of my brief, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property as previously described. On page 3, you'll see subject property photos. On page 4, you'll see request for income and expense information. On page 5, you'll see land sale comparables. What I've done, and you'll notice this in all the briefs for today, I've presented land sales as well as income information, similar to how when you do an appraisal, you look at a direct comparison approach as well as an income approach, and we've brought forward both approaches to the panel here today. So we have a range of sales. They range with sale prices of $65.90 to $96.98. The time adjusted sale prices of these sales range from $95.45 upwards of $117.42. On the far left of, or on the far right of that chart is the subject property. On page 6, you'll see the income information. We have 231 stalls with a monthly net unit rent of $103.50 a stall. That's the net rental rate for parking in the area. We consider this parking lot more in the Exchange. So properties in the Exchange near the Ball Diamond, we have assessed at $103.50 a stall. We have a 4.5% cap rate, that is the cap rate for this cycle, for a value of $6,376,000. On the bottom of page 6, you'll see the comparables. These are the properties that we have income and expense information reported from the owners. So when we do our modeling to get that $103.50, it's based on the net operating incomes reported from the property owners. So those stabilized net operating incomes per stall per month are what is reported, and those numbers are modeled to come up with that $103.50 a stall. All of these properties are in close proximity to the subject, and they range from $92.84 upwards of $300.74. On page 7, you'll see the income valuation summary. On page 8, you'll see general cap rate information. These are property types, none of them are parking lots. That companies such as Colliers, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, that they review with respect to cap rates, and we have presented our cap rates with respect to those same property types. We've used a 4.5% cap rate for surface parking. Essentially, surface parking is vacant land. Vacant land typically doesn't have a cap rate. And when you look at cap rates for surface parking lots, you have to be very cautious when developing cap rates on them, because properties in the downtown that sell, when looking at parking lots, they can sell for a variety of reasons. They can sell as ancillary uses, they can sell for redevelopment. So when you're looking at cap rates on a property that has sold and been redeveloped right away, and the income on the parking for it, you're gonna get a cap rate that's in around the 1 to 3% range, because it was purchased not for the income capabilities of the parking lot, but for the development potential of the property. But when you don't have a lot of sales, when you're looking at parking lots, you have to look at all of that information with a cautious eye. So you will see a range of cap rates. Typically, things that are prime for development will sell with lower cap rates, because the income that is being made for the parking is not representative of the property that has been sold to be redeveloped. You'll see higher cap rates for parking lots that sell as ancillary uses. So again, we're looking at mass appraisal, and 4.5% is the cap rate that we have used for the 2020 reassessment. In 2018 and in 2016, the cap rate remained at 5%. So for 2016, we had a 5% cap rate, and in 2018, the cap rate stayed at 5%. The reason for the compression from the 5% to the 4.5% from 2018 to 2020 was since 2016, we've been seeing compressions in cap rates for all property types. If you look on page 21 of my brief, we've presented some general cap rate information. These are actual sales that are bona fide, arm's length transactions where people in our department have vetted these sales. They have done a stabilized income to come up with a net operating income against sale prices. So the cap rates that you're looking at for these properties, we have a range of office properties. They range from 5.1% upwards of 6.5. Retail, we have a range of 3.1 upwards of 7.4. Multifamily, we have a range of 4 upwards of 5. And for industrial, we have a range of about 4.97 upwards of 8. When looking at those cap rates for other sales that have happened in other property types, when you have a limited number of sales that have happened for parking lots, and then being able to have income information reported to you for those sales, it makes finding cap rates difficult. So you do have to look at the evidence you have. There isn't perfect evidence out there, but you have to be reasonable with the evidence that you do have. Parking lots are essentially vacant land, as I previously said. They don't have, and vacant land doesn't have a cap rate. It wouldn't make sense for a parking lot that is essentially vacant land, that has less risk, less capital cost involved, than an improved property type. And when we have improved property types with cap rates that are sitting at the 5-6% range, it doesn't make sense to have a cap rate for essentially vacant land be higher than that. So that is why we are at 4.5% for our surface parking lots. I've gone into this in great detail because we're dealing with parking lots on this whole docket, and I think Mr. Navarro would agree that we're probably going to get into it in great detail on this first property, and if there is more clarification needed for the following properties, we can get into it, but that's also why I'm going into a significant amount of detail here today. On page 10, you'll see the income and expense mailer from the subject property owner. On page 14, you'll see the in-park details for the subject property. They're making $185 a stall, well, they're posting a rate of $185 a stall monthly as of the reference date, and that rate was waitlisted. They also have a rate of $240 a stall as of the reference date. A typical expense ratio for surface parking is 45%. So if you look at that 45% against that gross rate of $185, that's in and around the $101.75 range, and if you apply 45% expense ratio to the $240, that's in and around the $132 range. So in addition to the comparables that I presented on my page 6, I believe it was, if you look at the gross rates and apply the typical expense ratio to the gross rates that are applied, you can look at an idea of what that would be getting net. If you look on page 15, we again have the in-park details showing daily, casual, evening, and weekend rates. On page 16, these are more in-park details for the subject property, showing that they're requesting $225 and $185. The subject property is a combination of 3 in-park lots. That's why there's multiple in-park details presented in my brief. So it is one roll number, but in-park operates it as multiple properties. And the remainder of my brief is the addenda. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
I'll go straight to your cap rate information. So you have cap rate information on page 8 and page 21.
Correct.
Okay. Now you were saying that there has been a compression in cap rates, correct?
We have moved the cap rate, yeah.
Okay. But you haven't actually showed that compression because there is actually no Q16 information in here, is there?
No, this is just the general information we present in our briefs.
Okay. So without that Q16 information, we're just to accept the fact that you're saying that there's been a compression in the cap rate? Do you get what I'm saying? There's no Q16 to rely on to show that there's an actual compression there, so how do we just take that at face value?
Well, I am under oath.
Okay. But you're not providing any information on the compression?
I haven't provided any
Okay.
information.
In terms of the sales that you quoted on page 5, can you tell me which ones were bought for development purposes?
All of them are currently still parking lots except the first one at 225 Carlton Street.
Okay. Except for 225 Carlton, okay. Now, you've included a time adjustment factor in here. What is your evidence supporting this time adjustment factor?
Our modelers, when they analyze the sale information of vacant land sales, they come up with a time adjustment factor. So they would look at paired sales of properties that have resold, and then they would analyze those paired sales and come up with a time adjustment factor.
But just to be clear, you're not actually providing any type of time adjustment factor information.
No, these are our sales.
Okay. In terms of the subject itself, you have a 4.5% cap rate on it.
Correct.
Have you taken into consideration its configuration and also its location next to the High Line?
We apply 4.5% cap rate to all the parking lots in this area of the downtown.
Okay.
Those are my questions. Thank you. Lynn?
Sure, Lindsay, I'm just looking at the IME.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm just not seeing it right in front of me. You mentioned it was multiple lots, but I'm seeing the number of stalls reported at 165. So I'm not sure if this is the situation where this is one lot and there's other information for another lot.
With all due respect to this particular owner, typically from what I've seen, they own a number of parking lots in the downtown, and they sign a number of management agreements with IMPark where they aren't responsible for any of the, as you can see, there's no snow removal. Typically the only expenses they're responsible for is insurance and property taxes. And I would say about 75% of the time their stall count is incorrect. So I think it's just the owner isn't fully aware of how many stalls they have, because in part, I have counted this lot, there's 231
That was
stalls
my
there.
next question, have you actually gone and counted
I-
the stalls?
I counted the stalls in 2014 for the appeal, because there was a discrepancy in the stall count there. In 2008, our department went out and did a canvass of all of the parking lots, and went and counted all of them in the downtown. I have been dealing with parking since 2014 and have counted a number of parking lots myself. So we use our counts from 2008. If there's still a discrepancy, I've gone out, or we compare it to what parking management companies, because now they post how many stalls that are on their website. So we're able to look at that, and if there's a discrepancy between us and the applicant and the parking management company, typically we've gone out and counted it, and the applicant has done the same thing. So
So we're all in
I'm
agreement,
going
it's
to say it's
231.
231.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, and you mentioned that, I know probably we'll be focusing on cap rate, but you said that the model is 45% for expenses?
It's a typical 45% expense ratio, and we present that for informational purposes, because when we do our modeling, we don't come up with what gross is and then apply that expense ratio to come up with the net rates. We
Right.
work right from the net, because there's so many different things that are happening with parking lots, how they're operated, what kind of rates they charge. Is it operated for free? Is it given at a subsidized rate for tenants? There's so many different things that happen with why and how people operate parking lots, and there's so many intangibles that are really hard to substantiate with the limited information that we get. So to take all of that information into account, we just model right from the net. So the parking lot could be operated for free, it could be operated at a subsidized rate, it could be partially vacant, all of these things. When you work from the net, it takes into high expense ratios, low expense ratios, how it's operated. It takes all of that into account, which is why we operate from the net. But to be able to give another look at it, we then, the expense ratios that I presented on page 6, these are the reported expense ratios from these particular mailers, from these owners. So then we take those percentages and we model them to find out what a typical one is. So it gives us the ability to do a secondary check. So we look at the net operating incomes of what's coming up. Then we can use those expense ratios to look at our gross rates, because we do a gross rate analysis to decide and get an idea from cycle to cycle. So in 2016, we look at the gross rates, and then into 2018, we see if gross rates have increased. So it gives us an idea of what's happening in the market from cycle to cycle. So when we do those gross rate analysis and we apply expense ratios to them, it gives us an idea of the information that we're getting from the owners and what we're getting from our model based on the net operating incomes. If we apply those expense ratios to gross rates, how are we hitting? So it's almost a secondary check to come up with to make sure that we're hitting the mark appropriately for market value.
Okay, and one last question just about the cap rate. You're using a 4.5. Do you have different rates across the city? Is this a downtown rate?
This is a
Like
downtown rate, so we
Okay.
have, typically, prior to 2016, we had 3 different cap rates. We have a parking model, we have an inner downtown, an outer downtown, and a suburban. So those 3 areas get different income rates, the net operating incomes on the monthly rent per stall. And then in 2014, we had 3 different cap rates. In 2016 and 2018, we had the same cap rate for the inner downtown as well as the outer downtown. So we had 5% for those areas and 6% for the suburban. And then in 2020, we've moved back to the 3 cap rates. We have 1 cap rate for the inner downtown at 4.5%, because that's where we're seeing a lot of movement in parking. Our outer downtown parking model, we haven't been seeing that movement. The development potential just isn't there. It's on sort of the fringes of downtown. So that one stayed at 5%. And then our suburban moved to 5.5 from the 6. So we do have different rates depending on where they are, but today we're gonna be specifically talking about the core of the downtown. These properties are in the prime of the downtown. They're what I consider the parking lots that have the highest development potential, the parking lots that can garner the highest rates, the best event parking because of their locations. This one is close to the Exchange and the Ball Diamond. The remainder of the properties we're gonna be talking about today are all very close to the MTS Center. This is prime downtown parking, in my opinion.
Thank you so much for that.
And Linda?
I don't have any further questions. Thank
The
you.
only question I had was the number of parking stalls on the mailer, and that's been answered. Mr. Navarro?
If you turn to page 2, actually page 2 of the report, you can see that this location is near the Ball Diamond on William Stevenson Way. There are 231 parking stalls that we have also verified, semi-triangular shaped within zoning. That's multiple use, and we have the land area as 60,984 square feet. We're saying that the highest and best use is currently the surface parking lot. In terms of the income approach to value, we've used a rate of $185 gross for the 231 stalls. That is actually the random rate for this parking stall. We believe 185 is fair, given that it's probably the higher amount. Random stalls are the higher amount of parking stalls within this parking lot, as opposed to the complete reserved. So 231 stalls times $185 times 12 months, that's $512,820. We've applied a 45% expense ratio to that, giving us expenses of $230,769, net operating income of $282,051. To this, we've applied a capitalization rate of 5.25%. And the estimated value is $5,372,400, or $5,372,000 rounded. In the appendix, you can see an overhead map of this property. You can see where the property lines end. And you can also, if you could turn to page actually, just look at the first appendix there. You can see where the property lines are adjacent to the next property over, which is the CN property, including the High Line. And you can see that the property actually cuts into a section where actually there are parking stalls, parking on the adjacent property. Now, we're accounting for that income, but make a note that there are also parking stalls that are outside of the property line itself. If you open up your parking study package, you should have gotten one of these also. On page 2,
Hang
Just
on,
hold
just
it.
have a second.
I didn't get one.
I don't think.
We don't have one.
I don't know.
we would have supplied one for each one.
I didn't have one exchanged.
No, we didn't have any.
Okay.
No. It's just the briefs.
Just the briefs. Oh, okay. Okay, we'll leave that out then. That is my presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Wareham?
I do have a few questions. So you're using $185, and you indicated it was because a majority of the stalls in this parking lot are at the random rate and not the reserved rate. Can you tell me exactly how many stalls are random and how many are reserved?
I can't tell you either. I can't tell you the exact count of random versus reserved. However, we do know that the larger majority are random. And that is typical for most parking lots. The smaller majority are actually reserved 24 hours.
Okay, so you don't actually have the numbers, I just have to go by what you're saying here?
No, actually, this is in part, and I am under oath here also, we've had conversations with MPark, and they have also stated the same thing, that in most parking lots, the larger majority are random stalls, not 24-hour reserve. And you can go through any parking lot and see that.
Okay. So further to that statement then, I have gone through a number of parking lots, and there are a number of parking lots, and one parking lot in particular behind 443 Main, a majority of that parking lot, I would say 90% of it, is at the reserved rate and not the random rate. So there are parking lots, would you not agree, that do have more reserved than random, and it's based on what the owner would like?
I would say that in the case of where there are a larger majority of reserved 24-hour stalls, it tends to be because they are attached to some type of building tenancy. So they have an agreement with a building nearby. Essentially that parking lot is acting as an accessory to that building. It may not be the same ownership, or it may be the same ownership, but that is typically what happens in those cases, is that it's acting as accessory, so they're reserving it for building tenancies. This wouldn't be the case in this location. This is open market.
Now, you indicated that you used $185 because that's the posted rate that's being charged here. Would it not make sense to find out the number of stalls that are getting $185 and the number of stalls that have the reserved rate, and then apply both of those rates if you're using the actual posted rates for the subject property when coming up with your gross income?
So it wasn't solely based on the idea that $185 was the posted rate. You have that in your information. I can see that it matches our information. Had I handed that in, which I'm have to look into this a little bit further because I thought I did actually hand that in. What I can say is that from that study, we looked at the CBD and the median rate came out as $185. Now, we looked at quite a few parking lots, I believe in excess of 20 parking lots in the CBD, and it came out to a median of $185. That would be the reason that we have $185. The fact that it matches the posted rate is just a coincidence.
Okay, and then my last question, you questioned me on the compression in cap rates and the justification that we have for moving the 5 to the 4.5. Now my question to you is, if you don't agree that there's been a compression in cap rates, can you explain the justification in you compressing your cap rate from 6% from 2018 to the 5.25 in 2020?
Okay, so again, this is particular to this parking lot. I'm of the opinion that there can't be one capitalization rate for parking lots in the downtown. It makes no sense to me. So in this case, what I see is more risk than you would in your typical parking lot. Now, part of the parking stalls actually lie outside of the property lines. You're aware of that. We've both talked about this in the past. That, in my opinion, is a risk. The configuration of this lot is also a risk in terms of what type of development you put in. So we've had some conversations with planners from the city of Winnipeg and talked to them about the type of buildings that could go here. Because of the setbacks required, it would limit the type of property that you could put in here. The last point is that its location next to the High Line would also limit the amount of the potential development of this property. We're not saying that it couldn't be developed, but uses would be limited. So whereas the city tries to promote mixed uses, so residential office or residential retail in the downtown, this is what they're pushing. Residential would effectively be out of the question, or out of the, it couldn't be developed in this area simply because of its location next to the High Line. Again, that's not saying that you couldn't develop it. You could. The configuration of the lot, again, I stress that it would limit the type of development that you could actually place in here. And there would have to be demand for a particular type of development that would want that. One of the reasons that this parking lot has never, it's been around for a long time, It's the same question of that parking lot next to the Burton Cummings Theater. I mean, that one's been around for 50-plus years, 60 years actually, hasn't been developed. Its configuration is a bit of a problem. And this is what we think is happening in this parking lot. So that would be my reasoning.
And my last question, you keep referencing the stalls that are outside of the lot lines and the risk involved. Now, I was gonna point to it in your brief, but I think you can see it more clearly in mine. If you look at page 3, and the bottom photo in my brief, there is fencing there. Would you agree that that fencing is outside of the property lines?
I think we've looked at these before, and we've seen overhead shots with the actual cars there.
Yep.
And we can clearly state that there are parking stalls outside of the parking lot.
So my question to you is, because this is the line of cars, if you wanna look at page 3
Yeah,
of my
yeah.
brief, who put that fencing in then? Would it not make sense for an owner to not put fencing in on something that's not their property? Is there some sort of other agreement that's happening?
If there is an agreement in place, it goes back quite a long ways.
Okay. Okay, I think those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn?
No, I have no questions.
Linda?
No, I have no further questions.
The only question I have, and you talked about the High Line, which is the rail line. Is there not a new development going in by the High Line near the ballpark?
Lot 4, yeah. So Lot 4 is a particular case that it has ample room to take into consideration those setbacks. It's also a very large lot. It's not configured like this one.
Is it-
Please.
He wasn't referring to parcel 4, he was referring to the Richardson development by the ball diamond.
Oh, the
That-
Richardson, okay. So, so when I made the point that development is not impossible, those lots are actually configured slightly different than our property. They have a basic rectangular configuration. They're also developing a research center, which the property was owned by the Richardson Group. It's being developed by the Richardson Group. So what I would say about that is that's only happening because the Richardson Group decided that they could build there and asked the city allowed them to. It's not a mixed use. In fact, it's probably the only research facility of that type that you'll find in the downtown. Certainly for that type of property, that configuration of a lot, maybe it worked for it. For this configuration, I'm not sure that it would work.
But would you not agree it's a much smaller lot? In
Which
terms
one?
of square footage, the Richardson lot?
Well, there's 2 lots there. So there's 57 Westbrook and 0 Westbrook. They cover actually quite a large area. I don't know the exact size of those because I don't have the information right here, but, so there was a smaller parking lot, which I believe was in the neighborhood of, 50 stalls, on the corner of Westbrook and Lombard. And then there was the adjacent parking lot, which was a substantially larger parking lot. And in combination, I'm not sure exactly how big they are, but I believe they're actually larger than this lot. And they're also, again, configured the right way. They front Lombard perfectly. There is a space in between the building itself and the High Line. Whereas this one, I mean, if you look at the overhead shots of this one, it's right beside the High Line.
Okay, that was all my questions. We'll move on to the next property, 0 Edmonton Street. Ms. Wareham, when you're ready.
Sorry, 0 Edmonton?
Yes.
Okay. looking at 0 Edmonton Street, file number 19-2930, roll number 12093607500. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $3,161,000. This is a surface parking lot with 104 parking stalls located on the southwest corner of St. Mary Avenue and Edmonton Street. It's directly across the street from the convention center and beside the office building at 400 St. Mary. If you look at page 2 of my brief, you'll see an aerial photo of the subject property showing its location as described. If you look on page 3 of my brief, you'll see subject property photos. On page 4, you'll see income and expense information and sale information. On page 5, you'll see the land sales. Again, as previously described, they range from $65.90 to $96.98. The time adjusted sale prices range from $95.45 upwards of $118.04. And again, as previously stated, 155 Gary, Smith Street, 160 Donald, and 325 York are all still parking lots, being operated as parking lots by parking management companies, every single one of them. 225 Carlton Street is the only one that has been redeveloped. On page 6, you'll see an income valuation summary. We have 104 stalls with a monthly net unit rent of $117 a stall. We have a range in parking rates for our parking models, and our inner downtown rates range from $63 to $117. So as I said previously on the previous property, we have a range of rates, and we see that there's a range of rates based on our analysis of the net rental rates that we're getting from owners, and also from our analysis of the gross rates being charged in different areas of the downtown. We've noticed that the rates being charged in this area specifically, it's a neighborhood characteristic area, 161. It's the South Portage NCA neighborhood characteristic area, and it's bounded by Portage on the north, Main Street on the east, Balmoral on the west, and Broadway on the south. So it's that sort of square block of the core of downtown. And that is where we see a lot of money being made, reported by parking lot owners, and that's where we see the highest gross surface parking rates being charged, which is why we have our monthly net unit rent of $117 a stall. With a 4.5% cap rate, we have a value of $3,245,000. You'll notice that our two values are very close together, so similar to an appraisal, when you're doing two approaches to value, you would like to be able to reconcile your approaches to value. On the bottom of my page 6, you'll see the comparables. We have a number of comparables here. We have 14 of them. They're all located in the same area as the subject property. Only 2 that are not located in the same area of the subject property. Well, technically about 3. There's 416 Main, that's on the corner of Portage and Main. 91 Edmonton is on the south side of Broadway, so it's in a different area, a slightly inferior area to the subject property. And 330 Donald is on the north side of Portage. The subject property, 0 Edmonton, is comparable number 3. They're reporting that they're making $165.41 a stall. On page 8, you'll see cap rate information. I went into cap rate information in great detail previously. I think unless you want me to go into it, I don't have to, and you guys can ask more questions. But again, this is the area of downtown where a lot of the development is happening, where the most development potential is. For these types of properties, if you look at my aerial photo, you'll see on page 2, this is a rectangular lot. This is a rectangular lot with 29,785 square feet. This is a parcel that has development potential, which is what we think is one of the more premier properties, which is why it has the higher net rate per stall. And we do feel that the 4.5% is very appropriate because, as I stated previously, when you look at properties that have development potential and you look at the income from the parking lot, again, you have to be cautious when using income from parking on a sale that was purchased for development, but you're seeing 2% cap rates, 1% cap rates on those sorts of things. So I believe the 4.5% is appropriate. On page 14 and 15, you'll see the income mailer submitted by the property owner. On page 16, you'll see the rates that are being charged. This is in park lot number 84. They're charging $190 a stall. Random back lane and front lot parking, and there is a wait list as of the reference date for $190 a stall. They also charge hourly and daily parking. In-park reports that there's 104 stalls here, and I did count this for a BA appeal in 2018. And my agenda is the last 2 pages of the brief, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
Before, the front got a little mixed up and gave this to a different docket than ours today, but this is part of his evidence for today.
Oh, thank you.
And then what?
Let's finish this property.
I don't think it would be fair to.
Mr.
Yeah.
I have reviewed the parking study, but the one that you have is significantly thicker than the one I've previously gotten, and this wasn't exchanged to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't. It's not fair to her or
Nope.
you either.
Okay.
Like, I've reviewed his previous parking study, and if it was the exact same that I've had before, I would allow it because I do have a copy, but because it's obviously different, I haven't had a chance to review
Do
it.
you still want these in the files or
No.
no? Okay.
Do you want to return yours?
No,
or you were
this-
given one?
This is one from a
Okay.
previous hearing, so if it was the exact same, I would absolutely, because I have reviewed the previous one, but that one looks different.
It looks twice as big.
It does.
Maybe it's just not there.
Questions of the assessor?
No, I'm actually gonna ask for confirmation on this.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, we'll move on to the third one. Zero Donald Street. Oh, sorry, 172 Donald Street.
You'll just have to give me a moment, Mr. Chairman, I'm making a few notes.
It's 172 Donald.
No, it's zero. 172 Donald, sorry. I got zero in my mind from the last one.
There's a lot of zeros on
I
this
see
doc.
that.
Okay, we're looking at 172 Donald, file number 19-2466, roll number 12093378000. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $3,870,000. This is a surface parking lot with 116 surface parking stalls located on the southwest corner of St. Mary Avenue and Donald Street. This is one of City Place's parking lots. If you look on page 2, you'll see an aerial photo of the subject property showing its location on the corner of St. Mary Avenue and Donald Street as previously described, in close proximity to City Place, the Millennium Library, and the MTS Center. On page 3, you'll see subject property photos. On page 4, you'll see income and expense and sale information. On page 5, you'll see the sales that I have previously described. Again, the last 4 comparables are still parking lots, and the first one has been redeveloped. On page 6, you'll see the income valuation summary. We have 116 stalls with a monthly net unit rent of $117 a stall with a 4.5% cap rate for an income value of $3,619,000. On the bottom of page 6, you'll see the comparables that we have. Again, I've previously described these comparables. The subject is comparable number 1. They're reporting that they're making $101.23 a stall. I'd like to note, if you look at the rate they are charging, they're charging $145 a stall. That is below market for monthly parking in the downtown. If you look at the rates that are being charged for the other comparables that are in close proximity to the subject, we're looking at 190, 185, 180, 205, 205 to 225, 185 to 285. The only one that is even near that one is at 330 Donald, which is on the north side of Portage. So 145, in my opinion, is below market from what is typically being charged. We have 116 stalls, and one of my colleagues went out and counted this on November 7th, 2019 at 1:24 p.m. and confirmed that there are 116 stalls here. On page 10, you'll see the income and expense information submitted by the subject property owner. On page 18, you'll see the in-park details, again showing that they charge $145 a stall. There is a wait list for that $145. On page 19, you'll see that they charge hourly, daily, evening, and weekend parking. As well, they indicate that the number of spaces is 116 stalls. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
Yeah. You say that the parking rate is below market. Now, what parking lots in your list on page 6 do you think would be representative of the parking monthly rate in this area?
I believe all of them are representative of the monthly rate in the area.
Except for the subject?
Yes.
Okay.
The subject is at 145. There is no other parking lot that is at 145. There's a parking lot on the corner of Elgin here by the Red River College that charges 160, and that's on the corner of Elgin in the Exchange. And you yourself, Mr. Navarro, have been using $185 as a median for the Central Business District, which is $40 higher than this rate. So I believe yourself would agree that it is below market.
Right. So, looking at your expense ratios on that same chart, would you say that 27% is a typical expense ratio for a parking lot?
A typical expense ratio, as I've stated, is 45%, but you do see a range of expense ratios.
Okay, now on a parking lot with 35 stalls and an expense ratio of 27%, the net operating income would naturally be higher, would it not?
It would be higher, but it's at 255. I believe even if you had a typical 45% expense ratio, you're still gonna be significantly higher than $117 a stall.
Now, do you know where 30 Vaughan Street is actually located?
I absolutely do know where Vaughan Street is located. It's located on the east side of Vaughan Street between Graham and St. Mary Avenue. It's in park lot number 54. It is paved with no plugs. They charge $4 an hour, $14 daily until 6 o'clock, and $6 evening and weekend.
Are they linked to any type of office tenancies?
Not to my knowledge, it's an in-park lot.
It's an open market parking lot?
To my knowledge, it is.
Now, 264 Smith Street here, again, we have an expense ratio of 20%. Not typical, you would say, right?
Again, this is the information that's reported to us by owners, and that's why I said when we do mass appraisal, we model the information. And typical is about 45%. And again, when you're looking at 20%, you're looking at $208.99. But still, this is the information that's reported to us and the information that we're looking at. And I'm not saying that this information needs to be disregarded because they're claiming that they have a 20% expense ratio. I believe that has to do with how the property is operated and the information that's given to us. And I think you would agree that you get a range of information and expense ratios reported from property owners who have land leases with in-park or essentially in-park or indigo. They pay a flat rate to take over all the income and expenses. So when you have an owner who has very little expenses and has an income that they're getting on a flat rate that sometimes isn't representative of what's actually being made in those parking lots because the parking manager has purchased that income and has taken on those expenses. That's why you see those range in expense ratios, and I think you would agree with that.
So you're saying that you have a combination here of leased lots and managed lots?
I don't have the mailers with me, but I'm saying that that's why I do see a range.
Okay. So you're saying that the low rates here are representative of lease situations then?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Those
No questions?
Linda?
No questions.
Brent? No questions. Thank you. And you may proceed with your presentation.
On page 2 of the brief, you can see the property description and where the property is located. Again, the subject property is located on the corner of St. Mary Avenue and Donald Street, 110 parking stalls. This lot offers weekend, evening parking, and monthly parking, as well as casual, I believe. The site has M multiple use zoning with a land area of 36,474 square feet. We believe the highest and best use is the current use. If you turn to page 4, we have 110 stalls. I've used $185 per stall as the rate for the CBD. Times 12, that's $244,200. 244,000 times 45% is $109,890 in expenses. That gives us a net operating income of $134,310. We've applied a 5% cap rate to this, giving us a value of $2,686,000. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Ms. Werner?
I just have one. You're using 110 stalls. Can you indicate where you got that? Because the import details that I've presented, that I'm sure you're aware of, say 116, and the owner themselves haven't actually reported a number of stalls. So have you counted these? Do you know there's 110 there?
We did not count this parking stall, parking garage, parking lot. I believe I looked at previous records to get that count. 110 is what I saw in the previous records that were submitted by the owner. I assume that you've done a recount since then?
I did, as I stated. I didn't personally do it. It's not like me to not personally do it, but I was really crunched with this exchange. So I actually had to send out my other parking person who does parking in my stead, and she went and counted them. And I had her draw me a little map and give me all the information, and she had counted it on November 7th at 1:24 p.m. and she confirmed that there are 116 stalls there.
There would be count. It probably is off. We relied on previous records, so I would confirm that 116, if the assessor has counted 116, then I would rely on that. Okay, thank you.
Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes. So in this property, you've used a 5% cap. Your report here says, based on information contained in the parking study, which obviously we don't have the parking study. So could you speak to that 5% cap, please?
So 5% is the capitalization rate that we went with. Obviously, we're using the opposite argument that the city is using, and the city is using the argument that there has been a 50-point compression in the capitalization rate, which we feel is unsubstantiated by any type of evidence. There's just a lack of evidence showing that. We feel that the capitalization rate ranges. So in this particular case, it is in a prime location. We think it is 5%. However, there are portions of the downtown where we're adjusting that capitalization rate, just as we did in the case of William Stevenson. So 5% is not the only capitalization rate that we will present in future parking lot appeals. But again, we find the whole idea of one capitalization rate for the entire downtown to be kind of, I don't know, unreasonable. We certainly don't understand it.
So in the William Stevenson one, you used a 5.25. You cited issues with the property, its location, right next to the High Line, its configuration. This seems to be a
Ideal?
nice rectangular property at the corner of St. Mary and,
Right.
so can,
So why are we doing
yeah,
it?
there's only a quarter point difference there, so.
Well, I think we're, in terms of the adjustments that we made on William Stevenson, we were somewhat conservative, 5.25. You have to, recall that I said that that parking lot can be developed, or there is still a possibility of developing. It's just that a lot of that has been taken away by its particular configuration and its location next to the High Line. However, it's still continuing as a parking lot, and that's where I think the investment is.
And in terms of this property,
Yeah, it's in the parking, it's not in its potential for development.
you see this as the highest and best use,
Yeah.
not a lot of development potential in this property?
Well, if there was a lot of development potential in it, we would know about it. Otherwise, we're speculating. So you're looking at the configuration of the lot. It's a nice rectangular lot in a downtown area. But if there was demand there for a high-rise or an apartment building or a condo building, what I would say is, wouldn't we have heard about this already? So when we do a proper analysis of highest and best use, it's a very complicated route to take. So when we're suggesting that the highest and best use is not the current use, we have to provide a lot of supplementary information, do an analysis of what the highest and best use is, test it. And there are testing criteria for that, as you noted in the brief in the section where it talks about highest and best use. So we're not going to speculate on whether there's demand for development there. Right now, there isn't. And development as a whole is a whole, it encompasses the entire downtown. Now, what I would say is the lots that are being developed are the lots that are probably primed for development. So if you take a look at 225 Carlton, if you know what its configuration is, I mean, it's basically a 1 acre lot that's a perfect square. That's why it was developed. It's a very large lot. In fact, I think it's even more than, Ms. Wareham, I think, has the size in her brief there.
It's roughly 80,000 square feet.
Yeah, so,
Oh, 70.
yeah, 70,000 square feet, so it's actually more than an acre. It's double the size of ours, and that made it a prime location for development. Its configuration, its location, it would allow for a large density there. Now, that's not to say that ours wouldn't allow for development. Probably down the road it may be developed, but at this point I think parking is still the highest and best use of this property. And, again, Ms. Wareham says that there's no risks to it or low risk to it. From an investment perspective, if you're going to be keeping this thing as a parking lot, I would say that the risk is not an issue at all. So I don't know why you would go to, you would want a return of 3% or 2% on an investment like that. You'd want to push as much out of that parking lot as possible, which means that the returns would be higher. So I disagree respectfully with Ms. Wareham. I respect her opinions, but in this case, I disagree with them.
Thank you.
Linda?
So if we are conceding that there are 116 stalls?
It would change the value.
What would be the new value?
Well, we would just, from my route, I mean, I can do the calculations, but we would just essentially,
Look it through.
yeah. I can,
I get 2,812,000 for it.
I got 2,833,000.
Oh,
So 116 times
Yeah.
185 times 12. If we apply that expense ratio, we have an NOI of 141,636. $2,832,720, which is $2,833,000.
And I
And,
just did a quick add 5%, because that's what the number is, I got 2,820, so yeah, in the ballpark. Well, I just did fast,
I'm not
you know,
gonna-
on the
I get it
napkin.
from the NOI, from the growth. so-
Yeah. It's close.
I have a redirect on the line of questioning that happened between Ms. Nesbitt and Mr. Navarro based on cap rates and compression.
Certainly.
Be permitted. Mr. Navarro, I heard you say it again, and I sort of heard you say that you don't agree with the city on the compression in the cap rate that was used. For this particular property in 2018, you yourself used a 6% cap rate, and in 2020 are using a 5%. Would you not agree that's a 1 basis point compression in the cap rate that you yourself have used?
Right. So I would say that my,
had that
my
question.
evolution of cap rates has evolved.
Okay.
So when I was looking at capitalization rates in the previous cycle, I was looking at them in a completely different way.
Okay.
And I was associating them more with other property types.
Okay.
So in terms of what I've done this cycle, I think I've tried to rationalize this as strictly a parking
Okay.
um,
Okay.
issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So that concludes that one. And now we'll move on to 0 Donald Street.
So I'll just say right off the bat that we have 2 withdrawals.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
for tally.
Which ones?
The 2, or the ones that you asked for, sorry, not 2, 1.
Okay.
You asked for an increase on 1.
So
We
that's
have
the
to,
next
right?
0 Donald Street.
Yeah.
The second 0 Donald?
Right.
I asked for an increase on 2 of them.
Right.
So we're doing
We're doing
First
this
0
one
Donald.
that ends in 7,000.
7,000. This one isn't an increase.
Which is the one that's number 4 in our package, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We're moving forward?
7,000, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no increase on this one.
No.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Moving forward. Is that permitted, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Perfect. File number 19-3507, address 0 Donald Street, roll number 12-093-357-000. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $2,600,000. This is a 90-stall parking lot located on the east side of Donald Street between York Avenue and Broadway. If you look on page 2, you'll see an aerial photo of the subject property as previously described. On page 3, you'll see subject property photos. On page 4, you'll see request for income and expense information. On page 5, you'll see land sales, and the subject property is on the far side. Again, one of these was developed, and the other 4, 155 Gary Smith Street, 160 Donald, and 325 York, are all still parking lots, and 160 Donald and 325 York are actually just on the other side of Donald from the subject property. On the other side of Donald and York Avenue, I should have said. On page 6, you'll see the income valuation summary. We have 90 stalls at a monthly net unit rent of $117 a stall with a 4.5% cap rate for a value of $2,808,000. On the bottom of my page 6, you'll see my comparables. Again, we've discussed the comparables. These are all in close proximity to the subject property. These are all in the same area as the subject property. With the exceptions of the last 3 comparables, they're just on the outside of this. On page 8, you'll see cap rate information. On page 10, you'll see the income and expense mailer. You'll note that there are less stalls on here. This is the same owner that I was referring to in the first one. The stall count, again, is usually not correct. I have counted this parking lot. I believe I counted it with a 2016 appeal. I have to look at my notes to know the exact date I actually inspected. The The property was inspected and the stalls were counted for the 2014 Board of Revision appeal. On page 14, you will see the rates that are being charged at this property. They are charging $215 a stall, $225 a stall, and $195 a stall. $215 a stall is waitlisted as of the reference date, and $225 a stall is waitlisted as of the reference date. At $195 at a 45% expense ratio, that's about $107.25. At $215 at a 45% expense ratio, that's about $118.25. And $225 at a 45% expense ratio is $123.75. On page 15, you'll see the in-park details again, showing they have hourly, daily, evening, and weekend and event parking here, the 3 rates being charged. They indicate that there's 117 stalls here. It's because there's other parking. There's the roll number, but there's the parking lot's bigger than the roll number itself. So within this roll number, there's 90 stalls, but there's 117 in the total of the lot. That is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
Yeah, just a quick couple of questions. So, in essence, you raised it because your net operating income stall per rate, the stabilized NOI stalls per rate per month are indicating a higher net operating income in this area?
Yes.
Okay.
We're using 117 for all the parking lots in this area.
And that's strictly coming from the stabilized net operating stall per month. That's what your model is actually using?
Yes.
Okay. Now, your model is not adjusting for situations where there are awkward or interesting looking expense ratios that are rather low, or they don't also account for business taxes though, do they?
We model directly from the net operating incomes reported on the income and
Okay.
expense mailers. That includes parking lots that have higher than normal expense ratios, lower than normal expense ratios. It incorporates it all. That's why we model from the net.
Okay. And as you pointed out, the rate is 195, 215, 225. You're not aware of what that split is inside the parking lot?
No, but if you are, I would like to know.
I'll try and get that to you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Linda?
I do have a question. So Lindsay, I'm looking at your page 1,
Mm-hmm.
where your assessed value is 2.6 million,
Mhm.
and I'm looking at your page 6, your
Mhm.
workup, which comes to 2.8.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it?
We have presented 2 approaches to values. So you have a direct comparison approach on page 5
Land sales.
on land sales,
Yes.
2.6 million, and an
Yes.
income approach at 2.8. So what happens in our model is,
Okay.
our model will default to the higher value. So if our land sales are coming in with a higher value, our model always defaults from the income to that. In reviewing these properties for appeals previous to today, and reviewing the market information that we have, these properties in this area of the downtown, for some of the classifications that our model applied for the income, was, in my opinion, not correct. And because we're here in appeal, questioning the assessed value, I have to review the information based on market information. And based on a review of the market information, these properties specifically in this area, this NCA that I described, bounded by Balmoral, Portage, Main, and Broadway, this NCA is the best parking based on the information and the market information we have. So I've reviewed these properties, which is why we're going for increases on some of them, because the modeled income I did not think was appropriate. So in this situation, the value of 2.6 million versus the 2.8, that wasn't a significant enough increase to request an increase, but I'm showing you that the market value based on our modeled income with defensible market information would be 2.8. I just didn't go through the effort of putting in the paperwork to request the increase because the percentage difference from that 2.6 was not warranted. So which is why I've been presenting that information. You'll actually notice it in all my briefs. There's typically 2 rates that are being applied. And we've presented market information for both of that. So similar to an appraisal report, when you have 2 approaches to value and you reconcile them, this is just a situation where I didn't put forward the paperwork because typically our department does not go for increases on low percentages.
May I direct a question to the assessor?
Sure.
So you've chosen a rate of 95.57 based on your time adjusted sale price, correct?
I did not choose it, that's our model.
Okay, that's your model. None of your comparables actually support that. They're actually indicating a higher, much higher value. Well, how is this the sales comparison approach?
These are the comparables I've shown here today.
Your comparables don't actually back up your subject assessment. Like they're not an average, or they're not anything, like they're not really relating to the comparables.
In what sense?
So when I use a set
So
of comparables.
the subject is $95.57 and my range is $95.45 to $118.04.
So you're just saying that that is the range of sales and that's what the subject is? Is that simply what the comparables are there for, to show a range?
No, the comparables are there to show market information, to show the rate that's being applied to the subject, and then the comparables defend it. Similar to a rent, if we have a rent of $12 a square foot, we typically provide comparables to defend that $12 a square foot. Our per square foot rate is $95.57, and these are my land sale comparables to defend that $95.57.
Okay.
Similar to my rate of $117 a stall, I have shown a range of comparables for my rate of $117 a stall that range. That's, all I'm doing is
So the only
presenting
one
market evidence.
Right, the only
to
one that's
support
actually
it.
close to the subject is actually comparable 3, Smith Street.
Are you wanting like the sale evidence to be exact to the subject? Like that doesn't
No,
make
no.
sense.
No, I think that it's not an exact science. She appears to have gone to the lower rate
Yeah,
in the range,
yeah.
still within the range.
Okay. Now, with that particular sale, again, that one increased from 66.16 in 2014 when it sold to 95.45, and I'm assuming we're using 2017 data, right?
Our reference date is April 1st, 2018.
Okay, but most of the information actually comes from 2017.
I can't speak to how our time adjustment works, but I do know our reference date is April 1st, 2018, and we try to make all of our information as close to that date as possible.
Thank you.
And that sale on Smith Street is actually the parking lot directly beside. If you look at my aerial photo, that's the Smith Street sale. This is this one.
Any further questions?
So just going back to the 26 versus, or 2.6 versus 2.8. The difference is one is through the land sale, direct sales approach versus your income. You've chosen to stay with that lower value,
I would have gone
which
with-
is about, the other one is just 8% higher. So you felt that 8% increase based on your income approach wasn't.
Typically, I could have requested an increase on all of them. Typically, our department will request increases above the 10% range. We can present information. I'm here under oath presenting what I think market value could be. I could have gone through the effort of requesting increases.
No, I'm
on-
not asking you why you, we were here to defend the 2.6, right?
2.6 is the value under appeal. I have
Okay.
presented market evidence to defend that 2.6,
Right.
and I have defended
Using
market
the sales
evidence
approach.
to defend 2.8. So I have market evidence to say that the assessed value could be 2.8, but the assessed value on file is 2.6, and I believe it's appropriate.
Thank you.
Linda?
No, I think I'm fine.
I just have one question. So just to confirm, the roll went out at 2.6.
And that is what we are here defending, which is why I said to maintain the 2020 assessed value of 2.6.
Thank you. Mr. Navarra.
Yeah, I think we can just go to page 4. That is just the gross value, because everything else is pretty much repetition unless you wanna know where it is, but I think you already know where it is.
I think we've
Yep.
seen it, yes.
Okay. So we have 90 parking stalls, we've chosen a rate of 185, monthly gross rate, again, this is based on, had you seen that study, there would have been a rate there of 185 per month, for the CBD. And as you know, in that previous case, we had a rate of 185 that matched the posted rate. And I stated that was, again, a coincidence. In this case, it's actually lower than the posted rate. And again, I've gone with the median of the comparables that I've used. So times 12 months, that gives us $199,800. 45% expense ratio, that gives us expenses of $89,910. A net operating income of $109,890, to which we've applied a 5% capitalization rate. That gives us a value of $2,198,000.
Thank you.
That's it.
Questions?
I just have one, it might end up being two, but we're gonna try to keep it at one. Mr. Navarro, again, like you said to me, I respect your opinion and the work that you've done and the information that you've come up with. We do disagree on some things. When you look at the $185, and you've gone to a great amount of lengths with respect to trying to research parking and look into what's happening in parking in the downtown. Now you've looked at the gross rates in the central business district, you've looked at expense ratios, but have you gone a step further to compare what parking lots are actually making to come up with when you're looking at NOIs, and you say, okay, here's what my NOI has come up with based on a gross with an expense ratio applied to come up with an NOI? Do you then take the step further to compare your NOIs with what people are actually making to see how that's hitting the mark?
So, I've tried, like you have tried, to do this, and you know that we both come up against the same wall, which is that because these properties are leased, they're leased by companies like InPark and Indigo, we don't always get that information. In fact, most of the time we don't get that information. So we are kind of in the position where we have to apply a market approach to this. So that is why we undertake the research that we do. We look at market parking rates for certain areas. My model, if you could call it a model, is slightly different than the city's model. I've broken it up into 3 areas. The CBD, the Exchange District, and areas outside of the CBD directly. I haven't gone into areas that are way outside of the CBD or outside of the downtown, like the suburbs, because there aren't many paid parking situations in the suburbs. So we limit it essentially to the downtown. Now, we take the approach that the most common type of parking is monthly parking on an unreserved basis. There are situations, obviously, where parking lots have other types of pricing structures. They'll have reserve rates that are 24 hours. They'll have reserve rates that are from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We're taking what we think is the most common type of parking. And again, this is one of those conversations that we've had with InPark. They have told us that yes, unreserved parking is the most common type of parking. Now, in terms of casual and daily and special event parking, we don't have a good grasp of that. However, in terms of 185 per month, we think that that actually is capturing what that parking lot would generate in a month. So in that sense, we think we're okay with what we've done. Choosing 185, in our opinion, is fair. It's based on the methodology that we've, that has evolved over time. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with what we've done at this point. It's really just a difference of opinion with what the city has presented versus what we have presented.
So I'm glad you mentioned that about the casual and event parking. Would you not agree that a majority, you know, you talk about a majority of the parking stalls being random versus reserved. Would you not agree that a majority of the parking lots in the downtown do have casual evening, weekend rates that are there, that they're garnering income on well above the monthly rates?
So in the case of parking lots that have that casual or unreserved rate per month, 185 is what we've seen in terms of special event. Yes, I mean, there is special event parking. There's no way to really capture that. It's one of those things that we have a hard time grasping. It probably is there, but at the same time, it would be difficult to quantify without looking at the evidence.
Now, you indicate that you work with MPark and have worked with them in the past.
We talk to MPark, but in no way do we get all of the information from MPark.
No.
There have been a couple of occasions where I've been able to supply the total picture for you, but that has been, you know, one or two occasions, I think.
Yeah. Looking at, and I know I've seen them because they've been submitted to us, but back to my question of, you know, talking to MPark with this stuff and being able to quantify. Typically, I have noticed that if we get a statement from a parking management company, it breaks it down from the monthly parking and the transient parking. Would you not agree with that?
I would say that, yeah, I mean, this 172 Donald was one of those cases where they broke it up between regular monthly parking and transient parking, yes.
So there would be a way to quantify it.
Well, again, not everything applies to every parking lot. I mean, it's often locational based. And again, I have almost exhausted myself in terms of understanding why one parking lot attracts more than another. Because they can be fairly close to each other, and one will perform completely different than the other. And as to why that happens, I don't know. So it is very specific to certain parking lots that they do perform differently. In fact, most parking lots perform differently. We're just trying to make the best of what we have, come out with averages that we think are supportable, and come out with, again, rents that we think are supportable, and hopefully try and capture what the market is saying. But truthfully, there's no real way of understanding how parking is working. We'd have no way of quantifying capitalization rates, as we've discussed already. I mean, it's a difficult task. You can't do it on the income that you base on a sale transaction, because often that transaction is based on a future use. And then the parking rates themselves vary so much, the performance varies so much depending on location, that it is a difficult task.
Well, and I think we've had the story about parking lots today, which is fine.
You're gonna get more, there's more to go. Those are my questions, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a supplementary question. I can't remember where we are in the cycle here.
I'm kind of losing track too.
I'm not sure whether I asked, did I ask questions or you know?
We haven't.
I finished my questioning, so it's your turn.
All right then, go for it then.
No, I have none. I'll wait for you to say.
Based on the information we've heard about this particular parking lot, it sounds to me, and you can offer your opinion as well, it sounds to me as though this might be one of those better performing parking lots, this particular one.
Well, we take the market approach, so, I mean, you can look at the actual income statements, the INEs, and they don't tell you very much.
No, I agree.
So really, it's a question of the model versus my interpretation. And again, we do something similar to what the city does. We try and come up with a rent for this particular parking lot based on comparable sites. We've come up with 185, they've come up with something slightly higher. That is the difference of opinion. Would it be the better performing parking lot? I can't give you that, because I'm not there, 24/7, I don't know what this parking lot is. I've been there, I don't know how it performs.
Okay,
We're basing this on market.
that's fair, thank you.
And I have no questions.
I do. Would you think that the evidence presented by the assessor on page 14, that there's a wait list for these properties, would suggest that it's a better performing parking lot?
That was part of my question, Caitlin.
Well, what that would suggest to me is that there is a lot of monthly parking there, okay?
Yeah,
So, again, we don't know how many
we
reserved.
don't know the mix.
We don't know the mix, so we've taken the approach that 185, the random rate is the more dominant rate. So that's why we've gone with a lower rate. Given that there is a higher monthly rate there, again, we've gone to market. We're seeing that market in general in the downtown is 185, but yes, in general, we would have gone with a lower rate.
Okay, and I just note that the random rate is also higher than the rate you're using in your model. Yeah, okay, thank you.
And I don't have any questions, so we can proceed to the next one, 0 Donald. And I just have a question. Why doesn't the city assign civic addresses to these real property sites?
They did, they assigned it 0 Donald.
Is this the one that's being
Yes.
withdrawn?
Yes. Honestly, the addresses that, for parking lots, it becomes very, very difficult, and knowing that there's 0 Donald makes it even harder, but in-park usually has a different address than we do. Sometimes in-park addresses, when we do have an address on a property, is different. We just gotta go by the phone number.
Okay.
The address is more of a descriptor as to where it is.
Well, no, you're quite right, because I park over there behind the concert hall, and when I put in my hang tag,
There's another one with an
it's a different civic address.
Okay.
So, because on that street, both sides of the street are even numbers.
Most of the addresses actually have historic civic addresses, it's just that they've been taken away for some reason.
This one's being withdrawn.
Yeah, so this one's withdrawn now. And the next one as well.
This would be,
So this is 12-093-344-100.
correct.
Okay.
Withdrawn, withdrawn.
And then no address, Donald. 12-093-342-000.
Withdrawn.
Gets even better on the civic addresses, question mark, Kennedy Street.
Is your vote withdrawn?
Yes.
Question mark Kennedy.
It only gets a question mark on Board of Revision things, because we have it as just Kennedy, but I think when we don't have a 0 there or a number, it gets a question mark from Board of Revision.
Correct.
So, now, question Kennedy Street.
Okay. May I proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you may.
Perfect. File number 19-3357, we're looking at roll number 12-097-788-900. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $2,563,000. This is a surface parking lot with 83 surface parking stalls, and it is located on the northwest corner of St. Mary Avenue and Kennedy Street. It is in close proximity to the convention center, and it is beside the Winnipeg Clinic. On page 3, you'll see subject property photos. On page 5, you'll see the land sales. We have a range of land sales that we've previously discussed. I'm happy to answer any more questions on them. On page 6, we have an income valuation summary for 83 stalls for a monthly net unit rent of $117 a stall with a 4.5% cap rate. For a value of $2,590,000. Again, you'll notice that that is not the value that is under appeal. The value is $2,563,000. Again, this is a situation where, when reviewing the market information and using our model, applying our modeled rent of $117 a stall, that difference from the land to the income is negligible, which is why we did not ask for that increase to go from $2,563,000 to $2,590,000. I believe that with the market information and the sales that I have presented, as well as the market information for the income, we have land sales to defend our modeled land rate that was applied. We have market income sales to defend our modeled rent that is applied. So we do have a model, but we have presented market evidence to defend those numbers that is shown by our model. On page 10, you'll see the income and expense statement provided by the subject property owner. On page 14, you'll see the in-park details. They charge $180 a stall here, and they have a wait list as of the reference date. They also have casual and hourly and daily parking. This is a combination of 2 in-park lots. Again, that's why you see 2 details, and in my brief, as well as the I&E. Just 1 second, because I just want to check something. That's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
I don't think I have any questions. I think we've answered these, so.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah. Lynn?
I have no questions.
Linda?
And I have no questions.
I have one question. The mailer shows 84 stalls and you show 83. Was the mailer verified?
I counted this property was replotted. This previously was 2 roll numbers, and it was replotted to 1. And it was in, replot was 2 roll numbers, they were merged, it was done in 2013. Our aerial photo showed 83 stalls, and that was confirmed by an inspection on June 28, 2013. So we've been using 83 stalls since that inspection. The mailer says 84, we have not gone out to count it to increase the 1 stall count. I'm sure we could, but we have not done so.
Okay, that was all my questions. Mr. Navarro?
Yeah. We turn to page 4. Just look at the income approach. Again, we have 83 stalls as well, $185 gross rate. Multiplied by 12 months, that gives us $184,260. We have applied a 45% expense ratio. That gives us expenses of $82,917. And a net operating income of $101,343, to which we've applied a 5% capitalization rate, giving us a value of $2,026,860, or $2,027,000. I think that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Just a few questions, Mr. Chairman. You reviewed the parking information for 2018 and 2020, correct?
Correct.
Based on the analysis that you had from 2018 to 2020, have you seen that parking rates have been increasing in that time, or the amount that people have been making have been increasing in that time?
So you're asking if the parking rates have increased?
I'm asking you on your, you indicate that you do a market analysis. When reviewing your market analysis, have you noticed that parking rates have been increasing?
I think parking rates increase from cycle to cycle,
Okay.
as well as expenses.
Okay. And then my next question, you had this property in 2018, correct?
Correct.
You withdrew this property at appeal in 2020, is that correct?
2020?
2018, sorry, my mouth sometimes goes faster than my brain. In 2018, you withdrew this property from appeal?
I don't see the relevance of going back to 2018. I think we're starting with a new.
Oh, I was just only asking because I had looked at the value that you withdrew and the value you're requesting, and the value you're requesting is lower than the value of 2018 that you withdrew. And I've always seen that, you know, you always agree that parking rates have increased, so I was just wondering if anything had happened here that you felt warranted a decrease. So I just thought if there was anything going on in particular with this property.
Well, so again, I'll have to stress that we are starting with a new evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I'll take you through the process. We look at parking rates in the downtown, and we've collected parking rates just like you've collected parking rates prior to the.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to know if anything extra was happening particular, so you haven't noticed anything changed in this property, because I'm just trying to find out if there's anything I should be aware of that's of note in this property.
We don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn?
I have no questions.
I have no questions.
And I have no questions, so that concludes this appeal, and it concludes the hearing. Thank you very much, everyone.